When I was 4 years old, my favorite thing to do was play with my little tea set that I used to have. I would hide away up in the third floor of our home and steal little water from my parents' little vases. My father was someone who was pretty high up in the military, and he just didn't want to do some of the things that he was ordered to do. And it was a choice to make between putting your family in jeopardy or to go out and go somewhere else. We had an uncle, my uncle was sponsoring us or trying to get us to the United States. And so we had a choice between the United States or stay in the situation. We left in the middle of the night. You know, I just heard my parents rummaging around that evening. I fell asleep, and in the middle of the night, you know, I heard my parents say, "It's time to get up and go." I saw little wicker baskets of, I guess they were luggage, you know, of clothing and personal articles and so forth. And I just heard my grandmother crying. And we got into the back of a vehicle and we left. And I fell asleep, you know, on the ride there. We ended up in some remote village out in the middle of somewhere. And then we got on elephants and crossed over the jungle on the back of elephants, and it ended up in some other little remote village. And it wasn't until we finally got to the airport that I realized I'm not going back. You know, this is a one-way ticket. I remember the last time seeing my grandmother at the airport. You know, I said, "Well, Grandma, you know, aren't you coming too?" And she said, "No, I'm not." You know, and I loved my grandparents. I loved both my grandmother and my grandfather. And so she said, "Well, I don't have a plane ticket." And I told her, I remember saying this too, I remember telling her, "Well, you can just, you know, hold on to my little skirt tails, you know, and I'll hide you behind my skirt and, you know, you can come along." And she laughed and she said, "You know, just go on your plane, you know, it's time for you to go." The first couple of months that we were in the US, they were extremely hard. I mean, I remember my parents, you know, having to learn all new skills again, like turning on the oven and knowing how to use an oven was a big deal. We also had to, you know, relearn the language. You know, we spoke what I call Burmese English at home, which is, you know, there was a little bit of Burmese, there was a little bit of Chinese, there was a little bit of English. And to learn how to speak, you know, English and just purely English for most of the day was, you know, extremely hard. I was that kid in kindergarten who couldn't speak English. Even though, you know, I spoke Chinese pretty well, I think I spoke Burmese very well, I was that kid who didn't speak any English before I went into kindergarten. But going through middle school and high school gave me a lot more confidence about my abilities of knowing how to write, and one of the things that I loved was telling stories. And so my teachers really appreciated me telling stories in my writing and telling stories about, you know, my homeland and the difficulties that, you know, what I had pursued. Well, I'm very thankful, very, very fortunate to be here. I have a business that I'm putting together. You know, I can call myself an entrepreneur, and what I would love to do is be able to give that same opportunity to other immigrants who have come and, you know, try to make a new life for themselves, is give them an opportunity to, you know, to start their own businesses and be successful and live out the American dream. My personal contribution would be, one is to be able a chance to tell my story, for people to understand what really is going on in Burma, even though I came when I was very young. But to keep in touch with, you know, current affairs and what's going on, and to see that, you know, I am your neighbor and you are my neighbor, and, you know, we are not that much different, even though, you know, we come from very different countries. Is that we're still part of the human race.